Here now is your fabulous host, Mr. Randall White.
9:33 the time on this Sunday morning, Sunday Fun Day as we like to call it here at the Eat, Drink, Explore studios. And I'm joined by Patty Pyburn as well, who is a person who loves to make things herself, whether it's teriyaki sauce or barbecue. You're
Mustard.
big on the sauces.
Yes. The condiments. I love to make my own condiments.
Now, what about making your own, say, cheese or wine or beer? Have you ever...
I haven't gone that far, but you know, I keep telling my brother he should learn to be a vintner, and he's like, "Why should I?" And I said, "Because I don't have time." But I think someone in this house should start making alcohol. Anyways,
and
quickly. He hasn't done it yet, but
well, there is a one-stop shop down the road in Los Angeles area, the Woodland Hills, and it's called it's a good name for it. It's the beer, wine, cheese making shop.
Perfect.
Cheese maker shop, I believe. Sean Fitzgerald is the person you'll come in contact with when you step in the door there, and he joins us right now to talk a little bit about making these products that you typically pick up at the store. Sean, welcome to Eat, Drink, Explore.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so what do you typically get there? What type of person typically walks through the door? Do they just start bombarding you with questions? How do I do this? What do I do? Or are they already passionate? By the time they find your store, they're already passionate about it.
Questions a lot, always. People always walk through the door and think I'm some sort of magician that can teach them to do some sort of magic by making beer or wine. But once you actually get going a little bit and just take the basics, it's actually really simple. You can always make things really complex the more advanced you get. But for just the average person walking through, I've seen all types of people, everyone from college kids who think it's going to be the coolest thing in the world to elderly people who said, I've had this plant growing on in my yard for years, and now I want to make some wine out of it.
Right. And you don't have to live in L.A. to access your shop. You do a lot of your business online nowadays, I imagine.
We do UPS orders, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so... I've never considered being like a home winemaker because I have one Cabernet plant at home. I actually do. It's thriving, but I don't have a vineyard, so therefore I never even think about
how you would do your own wine.
Home winemaking. How does somebody get into that?
Well, with one Cabernet plant, yeah, you might be having a little bit of difficulty getting a lot of wine out of that. Generally, it takes roughly about 15 to 20 pounds of grapes to make a gallon of wine.
Oh.
So people, I've heard people growing small vineyards, but barring that, you can also pick up fruit from numerous vineyards around, the California area,
right.
Especially now during the season. Some of them are more than happy to sell you grapes to let you do it on your own.
I never thought of that. Yeah, so just, contract out at a vineyard and say, hey, I need... a lot of grapes.
I've heard everything from a vineyard saying that it's a 500-pound minimum to it's free, but you got to come out here and pick it yourself.
Right, because I would imagine in some cases they do need to get rid of some of the.
And
fruit.
here on the Central Coast, there is a home winemakers club where they kind of go in together to buy grapes and share equipment and things. So people who are truly interested can get started through this club, and you don't necessarily have to take the full plunge.
Yeah, and I saw some of the equipment that you have there in the shop. I would imagine some of that's expensive, like the presses might be the most expensive part.
Yeah, the presses and what's called the crusher destemmers, which you actually put the vines through, which pluck the grapes from the vine and crush them, so you get this grape swamp that's ready to be turned into wine. And yeah, those are the priciest aspects of what you're doing. Luckily, a lot of places who actually sell you grapes will let you use their equipment as part of an incentive to do that.
Oh.
But once again, as you were saying, we do have a wine club down here called the Cellar Masters. And yes, they do all go in together, and they have club equipment which they all let each other use.
Now, your specialty is home brewing, right?
I have done beer more than I have done wine. The owner of the shop, John Dame, who also owns his own winery out in Camarillo called the Camarillo Custom Crush.
Oh.
I'm kind of apprenticing that at the moment. I started with beer brewing, and the more I'm getting into it, part of my continued education is him to give me some grapes, and he's getting me some Syrah this year. I'm very excited.
I like that.
That is exciting. So is it a little bit easier, and this is my take on it, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, to take on home brewing of beer is a little more, not quite as intense as starting out with wine. Am I right or wrong about that?
Well, around here, you ask what's harder to make, beer or wine? And the wine people will tell you it's harder to make beer, and the beer people will tell you it's harder to make wine.
Okay.
It's just two different mentalities. Wine, you're basically working with the grapes God gave you. You can't make bad wine. Can't make good wine from bad grapes.
Right.
Beer is much more about cooking. You are literally, that's why it's called a brew. You're literally boiling it all up on your stove and adding ingredients as you see fit. So there are some people who come in and they've made beer with the four basics: yeast, hops, water, and barley. And then there are people coming in saying, I threw some saffron in here, and then I threw some habanero, and then I put some cocoa nibs. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they open up a bottle. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, because it really is just about any type of concoction you want to put together when it comes to a brew of beer, like you mentioned. And you can be as industrious or as lazy as you like, right? You can buy just a barley syrup, or you can actually mash that stuff yourself.
Yeah, mash. You know the lingo. Yes, when you go through the mashing process, you're basically through a chemical process breaking down carbohydrates into fermentable sugars. It can be a slightly lengthy process and take a little more of a keen eye. But as you were saying, yes, there are extracts of that, either in powdered form or syrup form, that take that aspect out of it and makes it a little bit simpler, and then you're free to do some of the simpler and more creative stuff, like adding different kinds of hops or different kinds of yeast to your batch.
So cheese is included in this homemaking venture. That seems also a little, something I would be wanting to do, but right now seems a little too, I don't know, complicated.
Right. I would love to make my own cheese, just so I can say I made that. What types of cheese when someone comes into your shop, or what do you sell the most of? Like, is there a certain type of starter yeast that's used the most, like for cheddar or for blue cheese? Where do people tend to want to go on that?
Well, that's funny you should say something like that, because people come in and they want to make something that they've had the most. They want to come in and make a light lager. I'm like, well, believe it or not, that's one of the hardest beers to make. People come in and say, I want to make cheddar. I'm like, well, believe it or not, that's one of the more difficult ones to make.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, because with cheddar, you actually have to press it out with a press and harden the cheese that way. And a lot of times it likes to be aged. So you have to cover it with some wax and stick it away and forget about it for a while. So we mainly start people out with good old mozzarella. It doesn't take much, some good milk, and you add something that's called rennet to it. And rennet, it helps make the curd. So after a while, you get this little layer of cheese on the top of your stove as you're letting it simmer. You scoop out the curds, you massage it with your hands, and you have mozzarella.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
And is it like, the mozzarella that you buy that's in sort of a watery mixture? That's how it comes out?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, you can get a ball of mozzarella that you can start putting on your pizzas.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I love fresh mozzarella.
I do too.
Cut it into slices with an heirloom tomato right now, some olive oil, a little bit of basil.
And once again, just like the creativity, people come in and it's like, I've added a touch of garlic to this, or I've soaked this in a brine solution, so it brought out some of the basil flavors. And it's like, wow.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay, so what about something that seems also complicated to me, like a triple cream or a brie, or like something like that? Are those cheeses difficult to make?
Brie can be a slightly more difficult one because brie actually has that outer coating, which is another, I guess I could say, bacteria. So you have to put it in a nice environment where that natural coating is in a humid and cool environment. So once again, unless you got a refrigerator with a humidity controller, it's a little more complicated.
Okay.
Now, along the lines of cheese making, what is it exactly you would be selling? You're just selling the starter yeast, or do you actually sell the cream and all that sort of thing?
Well, it's not necessarily yeast. You're using bacterial cultures now, so a slightly different family of microbes. But as my owner says here, we have everything but the cow. So we leave you on your own to find a good source of milk. Unfortunately, not any milk from the store would work. You need something that's not ultra pasteurized. But we have, as I was saying, rennet, citric acid, which helps make the curds, and we have a lot of different cheese cultures back there, so you can start making artisan cheeses.
There really is a movement toward wanting to know where your food comes from. I would imagine business. You can't get any closer to knowing where your food comes from than making it yourself. So I would imagine there is a movement toward buying the types of products you're selling. Have you seen that in the last several years that people...
Business is awesome right now, honestly.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it's great. Just as you say in the green movement, cheese making, which is usually our weakest aspect of the store, is almost one of the staples now. we're in this renaissance right now of appreciating beer and microbrews. So I'm getting people coming in all over the place wanting to make beer and wine. I mean, eventually people are like, why not?
Right.
And they're coming on in and having a good time with it.
It's right up there with that locavore movement of eating locally is just make your own stuff.
Yeah.
It is. So your website, it listed off for me.
No, it's www.homebeerwinecheese.com.
Okay, so homebeerwinecheese.com. Do the words go in the order of what's most popular that you sell?
Oh, I would say so. Now you mention it. It's not serendipitous. All right.
Right. So, okay, so it's homebeerwinecheese.com. If you don't live in the LA area, it doesn't matter. As Sean told us, they do plenty of UPS work as well, shipping the stuff out. Or just find one of the local shops that's near you as well and get on the movement. Or as Patty's been telling her brother, get on it and start making some booze here at the house.
That's right.
Sean Fitzgerald, you did a great job. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good reason to get out of bed this morning.
Fantastic. Next time I'm down in the LA area, we're going to swing by there. I just want to at least meet you. So thanks a lot, Sean.
You got it. Take care.
All right. So coming up next, we will be interviewing a couple of travel journalists. And keep in mind, our compass word this hour is home. So we just had the home brewing and that sort of thing. We had the doing a home tasting party. Now we're talking about leaving home in order to find yourself. That's what this top travel journalist says you need to do. You're listening to the Eat, Drink, Explore radio show. I'm your host, Randall White, joined by Patty Pyburn, and we are back in just a moment on this Sunday morning.